Just Tutors. In today's video we are going to learn about friction. Let's just have a look at the subtopics for today. We are going to learn about what is friction, forces of friction, and the factors affecting friction. Let's just have a look at the pre-assessment questions. You can please pause the video and try these questions, and once when you are done with them you can resume it to check your answers. Well, pat your back for your great efforts. Now let's just have a look at the introduction. Friction. Friction is the force which resists the relative motion of two surfaces. For example, ball and floor or fluid layers. Example, honey. Sliding against each other. There are several types of friction. Static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. So when we talk about force of friction, friction is a force that comes into play when two surfaces move or try to move across each other. Friction always opposes the motion of one surface across the other surface. For example, if you try to push a brick from, say, left, then force of friction will act along the right side. That is, force of friction always acts along the direction opposite to the direction of force applied. You can also see this from the diagram below. That's the pushing force, and that's the motion of the object. The friction applied to this object will always in the opposite direction. Now let us move forward and discussing what are the factors affecting friction. There are many factors which affect the force of friction. It depends on the materials that are in contact, the two materials, and the nature of these surfaces. For example, how smooth the surface is. And second one is the force pushing the two surfaces together. Pushing the surfaces together causes the more of the asperities to come together and increases the surface area in contact with each other. So now when we talk about factors affecting friction, let us consider two examples. The main cause of friction is irregularities on the surface. For example, suppose you have a piece of metal sheet which is polished, smooth and shiny, and a piece of sandpaper. Which out of these two things you think have irregularities on its surface? For answer, you may say that sandpaper is more rough. True, it is more rough and causes more friction. However, we place the metal sheet under a microscope, then we can see the surface irregularities on it. The next one is, which surface will cause friction? The answer will be both of them causes friction. However, sandpaper causes more friction rather than the metal sheet because it has more irregularities than the metal sheet. Another question can be, how do friction comes in play when two surfaces try to move across each other? As we know that surface irregularities cause friction, now the question arises, how irregularities affect relative motion between two surfaces? Irregularities on the two surfaces lock into one another. If we try to move any surface, we have to apply a force to overcome interlocking. On rough surfaces, there are a large number of irregularities, so the force of friction is greater if a rough surface is involved. So now let us have a look at the types of friction. There are different types of friction: static friction, sliding friction. Static friction, the force required to overcome friction at the instant an object starts moving from rest, is termed as static friction. Where sliding friction can be the force required to keep the object moving once it started moving the same speed is termed as sliding friction. For example, if you try to move a box, it does not start moving immediately as you touch it. You have to apply force and gradually increase it till boxes starts moving. This force that you need just to move the box is called static friction. So now once it starts moving, then sliding friction comes in play. When the box starts sliding, the contact points on its surface does not get involved and take enough time to lock into the contact points on the floor. So the sliding friction is slightly smaller than the static friction, and you find it somewhat easier to move the box already in motion than to get it started. So we can say that kinetic friction is always smaller than static friction. Talking about another types of friction and its examples, as we have learned that friction is caused by interlocking of irregularities in the two surfaces, it is obvious that the force of friction will increase if the two surfaces are pressed harder. You can experience it by dragging a mat when nobody is sitting on it and when a person is sitting on it. the force required to overcome friction. At that instant, an object starts moving from rest is a measure of static friction. On the other hand, the force required to keep the object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. When two surfaces are pressed together with great force, then the force of friction is also increased. So now let's just have a look at the practice time questions. You can please pause the video and try these questions, and once when you are done with them, you can resume it to check your answers. Thank you so much for watching this video, and for more you can please log into justtutors.com.